DDR1. DDR1 or DDR SDRAM launched in 2000. This was the first generation that changed everything. It ran at about 2.5 to 2.6 volts with 184 pins on desktop DIMMs and 200 pins on laptop SO-DIMMs. You could spot it by the single notch centered right in the middle of the stick. Speeds ranged from 200 to 400 megahertz effective, giving up to 3.2 gigabytes per second of bandwidth. It first showed up in PCs with Intel Pentium 4 and AMD Athlon processors, the machines that defined early 2000s computing. DDR1 modules usually maxed out at 1 gigabyte each, using a 2-end prefetch buffer. It was a massive leap over SDRAM, doubling the data transfer rate. But it was power-hungry and incredibly limited by today's standards. Still, this is where modern RAM really began. DDR2. DDR2 arrived in 2003. The goal was simple: higher speeds, better efficiency. Voltage dropped to 1.8 volts, saving power. Pin count went up to 240 for desktops and 200 for laptops. And here's the key: the notch moved slightly off-center. That's how you tell DDR2 from DDR1 at a glance. Speeds doubled from 400 to 1066 megahertz, and bandwidth peaked around 8.5 gigabytes per second. DDR2 used a 4N prefetch buffer and introduced on-die termination to clean up electrical signals, which meant more stable performance. Capacities jumped to 4 gigabytes per module. This powered the mid-2000s golden era. Intel Core 2 Duo systems, early AMD Phenom builds. More efficient than DDR1, yes, but sometimes higher latency held it back in real-world performance. It's fully obsolete now, but it was the workhorse of its time. DDR3. DDR3 showed up in 2007 and dominated for nearly a decade. Standard voltage dropped to 1.5 volts with 1.35 volt low power versions for laptops. Pin count stayed at 240 for desktops, and once again, the notch shifted. DDR3 sticks won't fit in DDR2 slots. Speeds ranged from 800 to 2133 megahertz, pushing bandwidth past 17 gigabytes per second. DDR3 introduced an 8N prefetch buffer, which meant it could queue up more data per clock cycle. It also brought flyby topology for cleaner signal routing across the memory chips. Capacities reached 16 gigabytes per stick. You first saw DDR3 in Intel's early Core i-series chips and AMD FX processors. It offered about 30% better power efficiency than DDR2, which was huge for laptops and servers. DDR3 lasted so long because it hit the sweet spot, fast enough for most tasks, affordable, and widely compatible. Even today, some budget systems still run DDR3, though it feels painfully slow compared to what came next. DDR4. DDR4 changed the game in 2014. Voltage dropped to just 1.2 volts. Pin count jumped to 288, and the notch shifted yet again to prevent you from accidentally mixing generations. Speeds started at 1600 megahertz and officially went up to 3200 megahertz, though enthusiasts pushed it far higher with overclocking. Bandwidth exceeded 25 gigabytes per second per module. But the real innovation was under the hood. DDR4 introduced bank groups for parallel processing, meaning multiple operations could happen simultaneously. It added CRC error checking for data integrity, and capacities exploded, even up to 128 gigabytes per module in server environments. DDR4 first launched with Intel Skylake processors and later became the standard for AMD Ryzen systems. It was faster, way more efficient, and remained the dominant RAM type for nearly 8 years. If you built a PC anytime between 2015 and 2022, you probably used DDR4. DDR5. DDR5 came around in 2021. Voltage dropped again to just 1.1 volts, still 288 pins, but the notch shifted once more to keep you from mixing it with DDR4. Base speeds start at 4800 MHz and already scale beyond 9600 MHz. Bandwidth per module starts above 38 gigabytes per second and keeps climbing with faster kits. DDR5 brought 16N prefetch, meaning it grabs twice as much data per cycle as DDR4. It introduced dual subchannels inside each module, so the CPU can access two streams of data independently. There's on-die ECC for better reliability, catching errors before they cause crashes, and power management ICs are now built directly onto the stick instead of the motherboard. Capacities are insane. Server modules are already hitting 512 gigabytes. Consumer sticks go up to 64 gigabytes and beyond. DDR5 launched with Intel Alder Lake processors and AMD Ryzen 7000 processors. It's built for next-gen gaming at high refresh rates, AI workloads that chew through massive data sets, and 4K or 8K content creation. The downside? It's pricier than DDR4, and it can run hotter at extreme speeds, so cooling matters more than ever.